Yeah, that's it. Great. Okay. All right. So typically there'll be other prayers and things that are done this day, but I like to keep the prayers short. So I thought we'd do three things. Do three things today. Is one, just recite the Heart Sutra. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about what it means. It's very helpful. These different prayers are ones recommended by Lama Zopa Rinpoche for these particular holy days of the Buddha. So what's the day today? Today is called the Day of Miracles. I think it's the day that celebrates, I think when Buddha was in Sravasti or something, one of the holy places in India, he performed all these miracles. I don't know all the story. I'm sorry, I'm not very good at history. And kind of proving his worth, I think. Somehow like that, I'm not sure. But I can't tell you more than that, I'm so sorry. And there are several prayers which I've recommended, and one of them is this one. Another one is the chanting the names of Manjushri, which actually is the prayer that His Holiness Dalai Lama has recommended that we recite. Venerable Roger, a couple of months ago, went to His Holiness and asked about the reincarnation of Lama Zopa. Was there any sign that he's around yet? Has he come back yet, you know? So His Holiness gave the advice that we should recite, I think for 6 months, recite this prayer. So as individual students are doing it, and we certainly do it on Saturday. Monks and nuns leave these sessions on Saturdays. This is not that session, but the monks and nuns around the world lead these different sessions of reciting that prayer. It takes about 30 minutes, reciting these verses. So I thought we'd do those two to celebrate this day. And then we just do dedication prayers at the end. We'll do those. That was what I thought. So why don't we recite? Let's recite the Heart Sutra. But remembering, okay. So these days, these special days, they're related to the Tibetan lunar calendar. And there are certain days in the calendar that are said to be, more auspicious and less auspicious for certain activities. In fact, in the calendar that we've been putting out, we put it out with the Prison Project based on Tibetan astrology. There's every single day of the year. There's a different kind of day, favorable day, unfavorable day, various days, all related to the combination of the elements. So that's very much related. This is very much how the Tibetan astrologers think, So the particular days like this one, that are called one of the 4 Buddha days, very powerful days astrologically, all certain energies are aligning, that they would say causes that day to be more beneficial to do things, which I think is not impossible to understand. I mean, at a grosser level, you could say when the sun is shining and the wind is quiet, it's a really good day to sit in the sun. It's kind of the conditions are appropriate. So here it's just at a more subtle level, the conditions are appropriate. So they would suggest for spiritual practice. That's how they talk, So today is one of those days. So the Heart Sutra. So we think about our motivation. We're going to do this little practice, listen to a few teachings about emptiness. And so because it's this auspicious day, may we all develop some qualities today as a result of this, coming together, doing this activity together. So we can continue on our path, develop our marvelous potential, and be a benefit to others. Thinking like that. So why don't we recite the Heart Sutra first, and then we'll have a little chat about it. Not that I know much, but we can do that, okay? Let's have the Heart Sutra. Okay. So you visualize Valta Peak. If you've been to India, you know this place. It's near Rajgir. It's a where Buddha taught a lot and around that area. And this place, you walk, they've got steps up to it now. It takes about 20 minutes to walk up. It's very beautiful, very small spot, right on a hill, super clear, overlooking all the area, very kind, clear, and incredibly hot during the summer, and a very popular place for Buddhist groups to go there, And so apparently Buddha taught a lot there. And apparently one of the ways he taught, one of the many ways that he taught was, and this is an example, he was in meditation, completely absorbed, in this case, completely absorbed in concentration on emptiness. And what he did in this case, this one, he would channel his thoughts to his disciples. Clearly, they're highly realized as well. So Shariputra is one of them. And the other one they say is Avalokitesvara, but not as a deity, but as a human, 10th level bodhisattva. So basically, he's channeling his thoughts to these two disciples, and then they speak. So it's called Buddha's teaching, even though they're speaking the words. Apparently, this is a common way he gave his teachings. Apparently. So we visualize him sitting there. And as it says, with a great host of monks and a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. And it's a very small place. I always wondered, it's very small. If you've been there, you know how small it is. And then it says a great community of monks, a great community of bodhisattvas. I always wondered where they sat. So I remember asking Geshe Dagpa in San Francisco, where do they all sit? He said, oh, what do you think? In the sky. You're supposed to laugh at that. I mean, you know, can you imagine how highly realized you are? That first of all, he's sitting there in meditation, he's channeling his thoughts and they speak, and they're all sitting in the sky. So as you wish. So you can visualize yourself in the sky if you like, listening to the words. It's basically a conversation between Shariputra and Avalokitesvara about emptiness. So we'll talk about it after, then we'll do the other prayer. All right, so I prostrate to the Arya triple gem. So thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on Mass of Vultures Mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration of on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. So then through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? So he said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. And now he says, form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form, and form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not efficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There's no eye element, and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it's not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tata gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, Arya Avalokitesvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. So Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shalavatiputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, Arya Avalokitesvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. Okay, so this is spoken by the Buddha, his thoughts, and it's spoken from the perspective, this is the point, it's spoken from the perspective of a person absorbed in single point of concentration on emptiness, That's what they're saying. So basically it's Buddha listing those groups, those groups of things. First of all, the different groupings. It's basically the Buddha's worldview, consisting of different groups of phenomena. So the one group he just talked, as we know, is this 5 aggregates. So this is a way, coming from one of Buddha's sutras, of him presenting the components of a person into 5 little bundles, 5 components, 5 things. The first grouping. The next group is what they call the 18 constituents, and that's first of all the 6 sense consciousnesses, and then there's the objects of those 6, and then even what they call this subtle kind of, what they call it. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, there's the objects of the 5 aggregates. Then you've got the next grouping, as I said, is the 18 constituents, which is the first is of no I, no ear, no nose, the 6 sense, as they call the 6 sense consciousnesses, including the mind, the mental consciousness, then the objects of those, and then they alter these subtler energy they call the elements. So there's 18 altogether. Then there's the 4, then there's the 12 links, ignorance and so on, up to no aging and death, no extinction of aging and death. Then there's the 4 noble truths, suffering, origination, cessation, and path. So there's the 4 noble truths, the 12 links, and these 5 aggregates, and then the 18 constituents. Basically, that's the universe as a way of dividing the contents of the universe, into these different categories. And basically, Buddha is saying that everything exists in this way. So, of course, we hear the words, it's all very sweet, and we like to recite it. What on earth does it mean? What's it got to do with life? Well, this is where Buddha, this is where he diverged from his own, the system he came through, the incredible genius, brilliant yogis and scholars before him, who, as Dalai Lama says, were the first to begin the investigation into the nature of self more than 3,000 years ago, and he went as far as he could go there. And he didn't throw out what he'd learned. He said his point was they hadn't gone far enough to completely rid. Their thing was to stop suffering. They learned to understand this Hindu view. He's saying was to help quit the suffering of suffering, help quit the suffering of change, and give up delusions, but not. He suggested not all the way, which is where he diverges in his own direction, specifically in his own experiential findings about the nature of self and indeed of everything else. So this point of being no self, there's this word in Sanskrit, I suppose, Atman, self. It's really equivalent to like soul or some essential energy in things, not just a person, but phenomena. So Christians certainly talk about a soul, Muslims too, probably, some essential energy. And for certain, in those views, it comes from a creator. But it's the way that it exists, the way that it exists as this inherent, permanent, unchanging thing, and the concept of a creator, that energy is the same idea of something permanent, unchanging, uncaused, that is the source of the universe. And then I think even the Greeks talk about an essence. One has this view, the West, I'm not sure what the essence of it is. But the Buddha's saying there isn't that kind of self. He's not saying, when he says there's no self, and that's one of the biggest mistakes we can make when we hear the Buddha's teachings, and we can be forgiven for thinking this when we hear the Heart Sutra. He says very blatantly, there is no this, there is no that, there is no this, and there is no that. You think, what am I supposed to think about that? Is there or isn't there? Make up his mind. So it's not so much that there isn't, this is the point, it seems. It's not so much that there is not a this or a that. But what he's saying is that there is no this or that inherently, intrinsically, from its own side, in and of itself. And that's the part that's hard to understand. We can't get that. We can't hear that nuance, you know. And that's, of course, the point. So the spiritual implications of understanding this are massive. This is the source of what Buddha refers to as liberation from suffering and its causes. This is the understanding this, getting this in our mind is the source of what he refers to as nirvana, your cessation of suffering and its causes, your liberation from suffering and its causes. This is what he's saying. And all of Buddha's teachings, especially, you know, if you're studying the Tibetan Buddhist path and you're studying this packaging of teachings, that is all the teachings about conventional reality, how things exist, the law of karma, this one, that one, you know, the mind, how it works, bodhicitta, all the path to Buddhahood. They're all the conventional things. So that it leads, all of that leads to the understanding of the ultimate character of these things. And this is the piece that's the most difficult, and everything leads to it. Of course, it doesn't mean we can't listen to it immediately, but it's the most advanced. And all the work on understanding karma and preparing our minds and doing all our practice, they prepare our mind to be able to accomplish the insight into this reality. So, of course, it sounds so abstract as we hear it initially. So the best way to understand emptiness, this absence in all phenomena of an inherent character, which is the ultimate way of saying how things exist, is to understand how things exist conventionally. And the term dependent arising or interdependence is like the shorthand for how things exist that way. And emptiness is like the shorthand for the ultimate way. These ways they talk, you know. So essentially what Buddha is saying is that what goes on in our mind is the source of all our suffering and happiness. And the deepest and the main cause of our suffering that keeps us, as he would put it, locked into samsara, which means locked into suffering, which means locked into being born again and again and again and again, up and down like a yo-yo, from suffering life to unsuffering life to suffering life to whatever, is this primordially subtle mistake in our mind that causes us to cling to believe utterly, and it's so subtle we don't notice, that everything has an intrinsic nature. So that's why when we hear the Buddha's telling us, sorry guys, things don't have an intrinsic nature, he's telling us they don't have an intrinsic nature. I mean, we ask, why is he telling us what things aren't? Why is he telling us things are empty of that? It seems so odd, you know? Why is he telling us things don't have an intrinsic nature? Well, it's very clear. It's because we believe they do. But because it's such a subtle mistake, we don't realize we have this mistake in our mind. It's so primordial. We believed it for so long. So to hear that things aren't the way, that aren't existing that way is puzzling to us because we don't know the opposite. I mean, if you keep saying, well, I think that's called pink. No, you say it's not pink, Robina. Then why you're telling me it's not pink, Robina, is because I think it is pink. But if I don't even understand what that means, I'm in real trouble because things appear pink to us. So you tell me, no, it's not pink. It lacks pinkness, Robina. It's only because I think it's pink. But because we believed it's pink for so long, I'm just puzzled by what you're telling me. What are you talking about? We don't understand it, you know. So to understand conventionally how things do exist is, as Lama Yeshe puts it, the king of logics to prove how things don't exist. So of course it sounds very nihilistic. Know this, know that. It sounds very nihilistic, but this is the biggest mistake to make. It's a complete misconception. And it just takes time for our mind. It's quite subtle, quite nuanced, to begin to hear, even intellectually, the meaning of this, you know, because it doesn't seem to have any, like, what's the point? Why are we learning all this? What are we squeezing our brains for? What's the point of all this? Because we hear it, we can be very clever and hear it and listen to it and debate it. But what is the point? We think, what's experientially is the point? Well, when you hear what it's like when you've realized it, that's when we can hear the experiential implication. When we've finally understood in the subtlest level of our mind in meditation, on the basis of single point and concentration, you cannot possibly understand it or see it unless your mind has gone to the subtle level of single point of concentration. Impossible. When you do realize it, they say everything is completely different for you, and you've cut the cause of suffering. The delusions have ceased. There's no longer fear, a sense of separateness, attachment, anger, the neuroses gone. Not gone completely. You've got to go, got more work to do, but this paradigm shift has occurred in the mind, which again just sounds so abstract to us because we can't imagine a world. We can't imagine a mind that is free of attachment, anger, and pride and jealousy and low self-esteem. We can't imagine a mind that is blissful all the time. We can't imagine a mind that doesn't have delusions. It's very, very bizarre to us. You know, as far as we're concerned in our culture, neuroscience and psychology, anger, jealousy, depression, low self-esteem, and fear are just given equal status along with love, compassion, kindness, and intelligence. You know, we all have a little bit of everything. That's a normal person. Buddha's more radical than that. So it's encouraging to hear that this is a method. When he says give up suffering, he's not being too abstract, you know, and the causes are the main thing. The causes are misconceptions in our mind about how things exist. Now, this itself even sounds abstract. I mean, when we say what is the cause of suffering, first of all, we're only referring to the first kind, which is when the bad things happen. And it's always the thing out there, the weather, the boyfriend, this, that, the mean person. But Buddha's being much more subtle. He says the main source of our suffering is the misconceptions in our mind, layers and layers of misconceptions, some of which have this enormous emotional component. That's very hard to hear. That's very hard to see. So he'll tell us attachment and anger and jealousy and pride, which are all the voices of this root delusion, this one that we can colloquially call it ego grasping, that believes in an intrinsic me, intrinsic you, and intrinsic everything else. The main voices of that ego grasping are attachment to get what that fantasy I wants, aversion when it doesn't, and all the other dramas. The Buddha's telling us that they are the source. They are the source of our suffering. And they happen to be emotional. They're emotional, unhappy states of mind, but they have this very specific character of being opinions, viewpoints, conceptual stories about things. So it really takes a while to even hear this conceptually and then to begin to identify, you know, the delusions in the mind. It's quite subtle. It's hard work. So this view deep in our mind, subtle, the subtlest, the most pervasive, the view of this ego grasping, which is a colloquial term for this primordial ignorance or maripa, unawareness. This is the subtlest, the most pervasive, and the hardest to identify. It's the most pervasive mistake that our mind makes. That's how they say it. So the Tsongkhapa talks about the best way to really understand this emptiness is in the framework of conventional reality. So dependent arisings is like I said, the shorthand of how things do exist. And even this too is pretty abstract to us. When we hear that everything exists interdependently, that things come into place in dependence upon causes and conditions, we kind of get that, but the penny doesn't drop. Well, who cares? We think, well, who cares? What does that mean? So this stuff takes a while to internalize, to see the way it impacts upon our minds. So one of the biggest mistakes when we hear the two truths, these two truths, conventional, ultimate, dependent rising, emptiness. The really excellent thing is to understand them in relation to each other. So the trouble is, though, when we hear them initially, and this mistake is common, when we hear that things don't have an intrinsic nature, that things are empty of, and that's all that word means, that word empty means lacking. It's not there. Something's not there. Something is empty. Like the cup is empty of tea. Your bank account is empty of dollars. Well, here Buddha is telling us that everything is empty of a certain way of existing. Clearly more subtle. But as soon as we hear that the I is empty of existing intrinsically, empty of existing from its own side, empty of existing independently, we can't help but hear the I is empty. And then we throw, as Tsongkhapa says, we fall into the abyss of the great mistake. And think, okay, oh, well, there's no I. We can't help but hear that. We can be forgiven for thinking that. So it's much more nuanced than that, and that just takes time to begin to get a taste for it, you know. So this is what Tsongkhapa says, to hear that everything is empty of an independent character. So independent, intrinsic, inherent, in and of itself, from its own side, all of these are synonyms. So the I, the best word here is dependent, independent. So the I lacks independence. So it's a specific type of independence. The I, in fact, putting it conventionally, is dependent. So clearly, if the I is dependent, and we'll go into this, then clearly the I lacks independence. They're just opposites. That's a helpful term. And they all refer to that. Inherent, in and of itself, you know, self-existent, intrinsic, inherent. Of course, these words are used very specifically. We can't just, well, they're English words, but they're all very, like all language, all bodies of knowledge have their very specific language, don't they? You can use regular words in mathematics, then another body of knowledge means something completely different. So you have to learn the definitions. You can't just assume you understand what inherent means. We can have a definition, look up Google, get the definition, but here it's very specific. And the one word that is easy to hear is independent, dependent, independent. So the Buddha is saying conventionally everything exists in dependence upon various factors. Therefore, they all lack independence. So let's look at that, look at it like that. Of course, knowing all this intellectually, you can pass your exam, get top marks in your debates and analysis of this, but it doesn't touch the mind. That takes time. That takes practice. And it's easy in our culture, we're very captivated by clever words. You know, we're all very intelligent. It's easy to be captivated by this, but never touch your heart. That's a danger. So the Buddha is saying that, okay, Tsongkhapa says, okay, there are many, many, many hundreds of ways that we can say that things exist interdependently. It's obvious. So for example, short and long. We know, we can see clearly that short, this is a really good example, really simple. Short is not existing in and of itself. It's not an absolute truth. How can it be? It's only relevant in relation to what's long. There's no absolute short or absolute long. That's a really simple example. You know, loud, soft, up, down. There are many examples of simple things like that that are clearly necessary to understand the opposite in order to understand the other. They're not an absolute. That's a really good example. There's no short from its own side. There's no short in and of itself. There's no short that doesn't depend upon, in this case, long. There's a good example. But there's other ways. And so Tsongkhapa points out three particular ways in relation to specifically trying to understand emptiness, you know. So that they are one, that things, so let's, okay. Yeah, so let's now look at what does exist. One of the key things you have to start doing, if Buddha's telling us we're getting it wrong, how things exist, we first have to establish, well, what exists? And that's the conventional one. What is that? What is this? You first have, before you can begin to discuss how you misunderstand the existence of something, you've got to get first clear even how it does exist. What is a cup, mummy? What is a computer? What is this? What is that? What is an eye? We have to establish that clearly first. Then we can establish how it exists conventionally as the best logic to prove how it lacks independent existence, how it is empty. That's the thinking. So let's use the example of a phenomenon called I. We're one of those. We're not a computer, we're not a mug. You know, we're not a cup, we're not a tablecloth, not a cushion. We're a person, the words person, I, me, myself, even maybe you could say being, not sure, being, possibly, there's different definitions there. They all refer to a person, really, as someone who exists. So a dog is a person, a Buddha is a person, a hell being, Buddha would assert types of beings called hell beings, they're persons. A human is a person, an I, a self. These words are synonymous. So in relation to these three levels of dependent arising, the first one's really excellent. So in the teachings, entry-level junior school grade 1 into Buddhism is where, you abide by the laws of karma. You practice good ethics. You harness the energy of your body and speech and don't harm others. So when we start to understand karma, which is a big one for us in our culture, many people don't like it. There's this view that, yes, you are indeed a dependent arising. You came into existence in dependence upon many causes. This first one is causes. Things exist in dependence upon causes. Well, karma is a brilliant example of that level of dependent arising. So we all agree we came into existence in dependence upon causes. Now, if you're a Christian, the main cause is God. If you're a materialist, the main cause is mummy and daddy. We both agree causes came together and we popped out. Well, the Buddha's view is different. The causes of me, yes, indeed, mummy plays a role, daddy plays a role. There's no role for a creator. Don't need creating, Buddha says. But the main player in who I am is me, is in my mind, which came from before this life, in a previous body, and then before that, Nepal, that is very extensively dealt with in all the literature. So the key component of the law of karma, the law of cause and effect of me, not the law of cause and effect of computer, the main conditions are all related to my past actions. So this is a very powerful approach to take as a Buddhist. That means we start to take responsibility. Don't blame your mother, don't blame your father, you can't blame God, you can't blame, the outside world. I'm this innocent victim who didn't ask to get born, which is how we think. This is a major reason we suffer. So this view of karma, a brilliant example of the law of cause and effect, is that the main cause of this package called me is me from before. All the different causes, all the different actions I did with my body and speech in the past, based on what was in my mind, that programmed my mind, that then caused me to come running to this particular mother in this particular lifetime to have this particular life and this particular mind. My own actions in the past in this continuity of consciousness are the main cause of this me. Well, the implications of this are really tasty. If we really start to apply that, it already loosens the grip of ego grasping. This view, and the Buddha would say that, the view we have now instinctively of who me is this innocent victim who didn't ask to get born. We actually say that. I didn't ask to get born. It's not my fault. That view, Buddha says, don't blame your Jewish mother and your Catholic mother. That is the view of ego grasping, this innocent victim that is a set in stone, plonked on this planet by some other person who didn't tell me the plan, and then to whom bad and good things happen unfairly. My goodness, that's the personification of ego grasping's view of innocent victim, set in stone, poor me. So applying karma, cause and effect, already loosens the grip of the self-pity me, as Lama Yeshe calls ego. It's very powerful. So now for this analysis that is taught extensively that we need to do, to use logic to argue with ego's ridiculous misconceptions, there's the second level of dependent arising. That this I, the computer, the mug, everything that exists. The first one is exists in dependence upon causes. Here, it exists in dependence upon its bits and pieces, upon its parts. These are also teachings from the Buddha that are actually arguments with statements, with positions that were held, that he is arguing with, where he diverged in his own direction. The views held by the various Hindu views. I don't know them all, I haven't studied them. Where they would assert that there is a permanent, unchanging, uncaused, partless self. It's quite a sophisticated philosophical position. Buddha says it's a misconception. There is no such thing, he would say. So let's look at that discussion about how there is no I. There is no I that doesn't depend upon parts. There is no I in here among all the thousands of parts. And indeed, you can see, look at the parts of a computer, just even a mala or a flower, so many parts have to come together that then functions as that computer, that flower, that I. So the I, if so, I or person is the name we give to this phenomenon here, that phenomenon there. Each of you is one of those. And you can see you are made up of many, many, many bits and pieces. So what Buddha's saying is, due to this ego grasping, this primordial mistake in the bones of our being, we believe implicitly. According to that view, we believe totally that there is in here somewhere among all these millions of parts a very special part called I. We absolutely believe it utterly. In fact, there's two mistakes we make. We'll look at both. One of them is that there is a special part in here that is like, but it's like the boss part. It's like they say it's like the landlord that kind of runs the show. But it's a very real feeling of there being a piece called I among all the other bits, There's a nose, there's a breast, there's a foot, and there's an eye. There's anger and love and feet and toenails and an eye. In fact, our language expresses that. Our dualistic language can't help but express that. To one really good argument, which initially is like ridiculous to us. To argue with it, we have to argue with it because it's so instinctive. The mistake is so primordial. We say, I have a hand. So if you look at me and you hear me say that statement and you know the meaning of I and you know the meaning of hand, you'll agree. Without analysis, you would say that's a truth. But Buddha says we need to analyze because we are putting a lie onto that. We're embellishing that I. We're making the I more than it is. So, for example, I wish you the same example. I can't see anything. Where's my glasses? Where's my glasses? There they are. Okay, never mind. I will make a statement now, okay? And I will say, I have a mug and a mala. So this is just common sense. So if I'm speaking the truth, and that would be nice in this world, most people, we just speak blah, blah, all the conspiracy theories around. If I'm speaking the truth, you hear the English words come out of my mouth, and you will look, immediately you hear me say, I have a mala and a mug. You will check, you will verify that that's true. And you'll be relieved, okay, she's speaking the truth. And the point is this, what you must do, if it's true, you have to identify 3 phenomena, each of which is not the same as the other, each of which is separate, and each of which is independent of the other. That's easy to do. Independent here means if I drop the cup, the mala's fine. If Robina drops dead, well, the cup might break as well, but the mala's probably fine. So they don't exist, they don't depend upon each other. This is a massive point when we get closer to the one about emptiness of the eye. They don't depend upon each other for their existence. This is a huge point. We'll go into it. And they're separate, easy. Now, I was saying now, I'll go to the next statement and I'll say, I have a nose. I have an ear. It's a truth. You can see it, nose, ear. But now look at it, it's got to be the same thing. If it's a valid statement, there has to be, you've got to point, I said 3 nouns, didn't I? Nose, ear, and eye. Okay, pronoun. 3 things, 3 phenomena. I stated 3 phenomena. So there's, you got to point them out. There's the nose. And there's the ear. So we believe this third one, we believe there is an eye in here that we can point out, and this is the point, that isn't the ear, and isn't the nose, and isn't the atoms, and the pee-pee, and the caca, and the eyelashes, and every other billion other pieces. We believe that, and it usually sort of lives around about here, doesn't it, in the chest. We never point it out. We just assume I. There is an I. That's, in this case, separate from the other parts. So in the same way, if there were, this all sounds absurd logic to us, but this is really good logic to use. So if, in the same way that if the cup and the mala are separate and independent, like I just said, when the mug breaks, the mala will stay intact. So if, when Jinnah says to me, oh, I hate your nose, Robina, I will immediately say, how dare you insult me, Jinnah? And she will accurately say, Robina, I didn't insult you. I insulted your nose. Of course, we just think that's splitting hairs, but it's literally true. And as Lama Zopa says, you know, if there really were a separate me that we believe is the owner, a piece that owns the other pieces, if there were a separate me, then when Jinnah insults the nose, the me is going, oh, phew, I'm glad she's not insulting me. We'll laugh, you know. I mean, that sounds hilarious. But it's correct, the me would be intact. But we don't think that, do we? And the other mistake is that, well, it's the whole of me is me. And there's a whole logical discussion there to show how absurd that is. That's even more weird for us. We say, you know, all of it's me. Okay, let's go back to our basics. Define what is me. I forget the definition now. There's a particular definition. Okay, I can't remember the definition. But let's just say, you know, we know that a person is made of a body and a mind. That's true. Person here, Robina, she's got a body and a mind. Okay, that's the Buddha's view. You know, Christians say you've got a soul as well. Forget that one. Got a body and a mind, okay? That's 2 things, isn't it? So a person is the name we give to a body and a mind. So then we say, well, it's all, the body and the mind, it's all me. But that's like saying then, well, if me is synonymous with body and mind, if it means it's the same meaning, it means it's the same thing, which means it couldn't be separate. You wouldn't see 2 things. Then how can you say, I have a nose, I have a mind? There's 2 things. This sounds very weird to us, but this is logic. But why we just get puzzled by it is because we so believe, one, that there is a separate I, or the other mistake is all I. And these are powerful arguments, and one that we have to do in meditation to really, and this is just tiny. I mean, there's massive logical debates and discussions we have to do with delusions to break down their absurd views, you know. We're believing them for so long. So what are the implications? How would you be if you realize emptiness? I mean, it sounds so abstract to us. One of the fascinating things is when you talk about the mind in Buddhism, the Buddhist model of the mind, you've got the deluded, neurotic, eye-based, fear-based states of mind, which we think are totally normal, but which for Buddha are total mental illnesses, and he has found methods to get rid of them. That's what his liberation is all about. And they're called ego grasping, this primordial view of a me, which gives rise to this huge attachment, this emotional hunger to get what that me wants, which gives rise to panic attack of anger when it doesn't get what it wants, and all the other thousands of ridiculous neurotic states of mind in there, low self-esteem and arrogance and pride and jealousy, all the dramas we know. They are all nonsense, Buddha says. They're all conceptual stories that is massive emotional component. They're like the voices of the main nonsense of the belief in the me. So when we finally realize emptiness, which is way to go, you've cut completely You see nakedly that they're all nonsense. You know they're all fabrications. They're stories, elaborations we are literally built up, are literal fantasies. They have no basis in reality. It's very fascinating to hear that, you know. So the mind is literally liberated. You can't even imagine what the mind is like. But there, certainly, as you know, there is no fear. I always tell that story of Lama Zopa as a little boy. He was recognized when he was about 8 years old, or younger, I think, as much younger, as the reincarnation of a local yogi. And he was, when he was 8, he went sent up to the mountains with his uncle, and there was this big river. And there'd been some meditator in the past life, Kunsang Yeshe, who was recognized as his reincarnation. That meant, you know, he'd chosen his rebirth, blah, 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 all of that stuff. So anyway, he was up in the mountains, and there's a big river, and he saw these people. I think they call them white-eyed, yellow hair people, white people. Like, you know, sounds like Swedish people, doesn't it, really? White hair, white eyes, not white hair, white eyes, and yellow hair. Anyway, he wanted to meet them, you know, it would have been about 1952. He wanted to meet them. He'd never met white people before. So he had his bowl of, you know, boiled potatoes, his gift. And he went across this rickety kind of like a big tree trunk as a bridge. The river wasn't very deep, but it's very, very powerful there, the water. So he fell in the water with his potatoes, you know. Of course, I don't teach him to swim up there. So he's drowning. He says, and the way he told the stories is so fascinating. This is how they talk when you study emptiness and study this stuff and study the debate and philosophy. You talk like this. But he's 8 years old. He never heard of it. He never heard it in this life. He said, the head came to the surface for air. The head. Not I, you know, came to the surface for air. And he's always manager having a panic attack running on the bank, you know. Anyway, he kept falling down the water because he doesn't swim. And then he said to himself, he said, the thought occurred to me that the person known as the Laudo Lama, that was his title, in the last life, he moved to this cave that was full of radishes, I think. Radishes or onions, I never know, Laudo. So he said he moved them out and moved in. So he's known as the Radish Lama, you know, or the Onion Lama, I can't remember which. So anyway, he said, the thought occurred to me, the person known as the Laudo Lama is about to die. And then he said to himself, no, he said then as a commentary, now, when he told the story, I didn't know anything about emptiness, but there was no fear. This is so perfect an example, because we in our culture, who was that famous scientist who talked about, you know, instinct for survival and all the flight and fear business we talk about, you know, Mr. Darwin, that naturally we've observed animals and humans, and we see that when they're threatened, they have a panic attack. So we assume that's, as we say, normal. And when we say normal, we mean you'd be abnormal if you didn't have it. So we really see it as a fundamental part of a normal person. But the Buddha's is so radically different. He has found that these delusions, these neuroses, are not at the core of our being and can be removed. That's his whole point. That's his entire point. So Lama Zopa clearly must have done the work in the past. I mean, these great yogis choose their rebirth anyway. But he said there was no fear. So what that means was, we think if you didn't have fear, you'd sink to the bottom of the river like a stone. Do you understand? Oh, I'm drowning. Okay, never mind. But no, if you'd seen him as a little boy struggling to get up to breathe, but this is the part that's shocking. He said there was no fear, meaning he would have been struggling for air, but his mind would have been clear, okay, on the alert, but not freaked out, which means no ego grasping, which means no clinging to an I, which means no attachment, which means no anger. So we think you chuck those out. We think you throw the baby out with the bathwater and you end up with this kind of nothing person. No, intelligence. Buddha would say you don't need fear to know there's a damn problem. You need intelligence. Because we've all got ego grasping, we all have a panic attack when we're attacked, so we all have fear. So we assume it's normal. So it's a very interesting analysis. So clearly he'd done all this work before, because you bring what you don't ever lose anything from your mind. You bring it with you. There was no fear. And that's what they say. Even this sounds very abstract to us when we really understand the Mahayana path. Then when you realize emptiness, also you've got this bodhicitta, and your mind is vast as space, utterly blissful, radiant, clear, wise, powerful, seeing the minds of others, compassionate like you can't imagine. It's as if literally there's no sense of a separate I. I mean, literally, as Lama Yeshe puts it, when you have I, based on ego grasping, that implies other. I mean, look at the world. It's just full of others, isn't it? There's me and others, you know. There are a few others who do what I like and they're called friends. Some who don't do what I like and they're called enemies. And 99.99% who don't do either, couldn't care less, they're all drop dead, the strangers. Because of ego grasping, because of the three poisons. So Buddhism is really extraordinary, you know, psychologically speaking. So even that's about the Buddhist approach. Even as we're gradually practicing, starting emptiness is way down the end, but practicing starting abiding by the laws of karma, taking responsibility, giving up self-pity, giving up ego grasping a little bit, giving up attachment, anger, blaming other people up and down like yo-yos, giving up all that drama, you become more stable and you literally are becoming less suffering and more happy as you progress. It doesn't suddenly come overnight from miserable to happy. It's a gradual process. Because if the mind is gone of delusions, delusions have gone, what is left is virtue, love, compassion, wisdom, a sense of an awareness of interdependence. And you know what? The bonus called bliss, joy, fulfillment, happiness. It's such a marvelous view of the mind, you know. That's our natural state. Joy and happiness and virtue are our natural state. The other stuff is this junk that we've added on top, you know, but are the source of our pain. Okay, any questions, people? And we can do the other prayers. Any questions? Anybody on Zoom have a question? No? Anybody? Nothing? All right. Anybody here? Nothing, nothing, nothing. No? Huh? So even though we don't realize it, you ought to get single point of concentration, gone beyond the grosser conceptuality and sensory consciousness to get to a subtle level, then we'll get the penny will drop. But it's one step at a time, you know. Every time we hear it, a tiny bit more makes sense. Oh, I get it. And penny drops, you know. It's so delicious. So the key thing here I want to conclude with the Heart Sutra. Buddha says, he uses the first example of the first group, and he uses the first of the five aggregates, and he says, form is empty. So form is the first of the five components of a person, and it's just the physical. It's the physical component, you know, the physical, that's it. He says form is empty. Then he says emptiness is form. So what he's saying there? Okay, so one way to, this is what the point is. When we hear something's empty, we think it doesn't exist. So it's really confusing. So we hear empty, and then we hear dependent arising. Something does exist. And they seem to be opposites. They seem to be completely contradictory. We run from pillar to post, you know. So when we hear empty, we hear nothingness. When we hear dependent arising, we hear somethingness. And both embellish. Both are exaggerations. Both distort. So we hear empty, we over-exaggerate the nothingness and fall into the abyss of the great mistake. As soon as we see dependent arising, there is an I that does exist independent upon this and that. We then go, oh, there must be an I, grasp. What a relief, there must be something. So we over-exaggerate and we can't hear that mistake. And then when we hear emptiness, we under-exaggerate. So we run in between these two extremes all the time, you know, up and down like yo-yos. So the thing to become familiar with, even intellectually, initially, is to think, when we think emptiness, it tells us, that means dependent arising. And every time we hear dependent arising, we say, that means it's empty. When we begin even intellectually to put these two together, we are on the right track, and we will not fall into the abyss of the great mistake. So basically what Buddha's saying is, you see, the word emptiness throws us. There's a shorthand for empty, for lacking intrinsic character, for lacking inherent nature. So basically, emptiness of intrinsic character, emptiness of independence, emptiness of inherent existence, emptiness of existing from its own side, emptiness of existing in and of itself, all these synonyms. That all that is, thinking simply, as in terms of the concept, it's a characteristic of something that exists. So in other words, as Buddha says, form is empty. And then he says emptiness is form. What he's saying is, where you find form, right there on form, right there, inextricably connected to it, you will find right there on the dependent arising form, you will find right there the absence of independent form. In other words, absence of independent form, absence of empty form, absence of form, absence of inherent form is a characteristic of dependent arising form. So you can't have dependent arising without emptiness, and you cannot have emptiness without dependent arising. They're just flip sides of the same phenomenon, just two ways of looking at the same thing. One in a negating way and one in an affirming way. When we get that even, we keep on track. It's crucial. Otherwise, we make this flow out into la-la land. Because the nihilistic assumption comes so strongly. Oh, well, everything's empty anyway, we'll say. And we mean, oh, it doesn't matter. That's the nihilistic conclusion, a total mistake. In fact, emptiness not only doesn't contradict existence, it reaffirms existence. Things exist because they're empty. Things that aren't empty of intrinsic character cannot exist. Not a possibility. So like anything, you have to learn the words. Squeeze your brain, learn the words, It doesn't come from the sky. It's not mystical. Like any language. I hear computer people talking, I've got no idea what they're talking about. The words aren't mystical in their nature. You've got to learn the language. Nothing complicated. But we mystify emptiness. We mystify this language. Oh, I've been thinking about emptiness for 30 years. I still can't understand it. Well, can you please tell me a definition? No, I don't know. What does it mean? I don't know. Well, how can you think about it if you can't say the words? Thinking means words, and words are a stepping stone to the experience, But we have this weird idea that's beyond words. Wow. It is, but the words lead you to it. The recipe leads you to the taste of the cake. Kind of sit there fantasizing to cross your fingers to get the taste. Got to have the words and squeeze your brain and make the cake. Then you'll get the taste. So the words, conceptualization, debate, analysis, logic are the stepping stones to the experience. It's a very important point. We mystify things too much, His Holiness was asked one time, how do you apply it to daily life, your Holiness, He said, it's easy. Just see it. See the thing from another point of view. That's dependent arising. Because we're set in stone, aren't we? Ignorance is everything's set in stone. It is that with absolute certainty. It is that. It's the concrete fundamentalist mind. That's the mind of ego grasping. It is this, absolutely. And that's the drama that we live in. We're crashing into reality all the time because we think it's this and it's that, and I'm right and you're wrong. That's the absolute the certainty of this absolute view of the way we're all fundamentalists, Just see it from another perspective. That's applying dependent arising, which is applying emptiness. Things don't have an intrinsic character. I mean, there's also easy way. I mean, the analysis to find in this technique, the meditation technique, you've got to first establish in the second one about parts. You have to establish what you think your I is. Then you have to search for it. That sounds hilarious to us. And it's either going to be separate from the other parts or oneness with the other parts. So you do much logic and analysis and meditating to get the conclusion that there is no inherent I there. And then you realize the subtlest one, that I, cup, computer, is merely a name that we put on the parts. It's not, I mean, we can see it. Where's my thermos? I haven't got my thermos. I've got a cup. Okay, hang on. So we'll say the same as an eye, a cup. We'll say cup. We'll say my cup has a base. My cup has you know, what do you call that? This the circular bit, the piece of clay, huh?
The rim.
What's it called? Rim. Sure, whatever. So let's, and we go, oh, good. So how many phenomena did I just mention? How many nouns did I mention? Cup, forget my cup, clay, sides, a cup, sides, base, right? That's three things, isn't it? So if that's a true statement, you've got to point out three things. First, it's logical. So there's the sides and there's the base. Excuse me, where's the cup? Apart from the sides. And where's the base? Apart from the cup, apart from the other two. It's clear it's not there because sides and base are the basis of the label cup. That's the way to put it. That's the way to put it. The parts here, the mind and the body, the love, the compassion, the hate, the this, the jealousy, the body, the nose, the eye, the muscles, they are merely the pieces that we put the label I upon. And you won't find an I among those. So it's more relaxed, loose, kind of relaxed, easygoing, you know. That's why Lama Zopa said the head. It's good practice. They talk about the mind like that. Anger does this, and jealousy does that, and love is this. They're states of mind that have their own way of thinking. So we should be more objective, not I am angry, I am proud, I am drowning. No, the body's drowning. Your mind can't drown. That's ridiculous. It's very helpful. It's very helpful. So I is merely labeled. The I is merely labeled upon the parts. And they're going to be valid parts. You can't just say that's cup or a kuka. It's called a mala. We've established that conventionally. You know, establish it. Then you have to look for that phenomenon that you think is in there intrinsically. Gosh, what time is it? I said I'd be 1 hour, and I've been an hour and a half already just blaring on. I'm so sorry. Am I keeping you waiting? Oh my God, I better finish. I've got another. Yes, go talk.
Can you tell us how the story ends?
Lama Zopa, I don't know. He obviously got saved. The manager, I think, must have found him and told him off. And then Lama Zopa's learning from it was he didn't do what his teacher said, because his teacher told him not to go. But he's determined to meet these yellow-eyed people, white-eyed people. Something he got told off by his manager. But I think he was relieved. The manager was relieved, wasn't he? To not lose this little boy and drown this little boy, you know. That's the end of it, but I know. So listen, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So I think we forget the chanting the names and we just do dedication and we're done. Okay? Is that all right, Sonny? Yes? Thank you. No questions, then. Not one single question, except for you. Go on, go. Yes.
What's the third part of the
Merely labeled.
Huh?
Merely labeled.
Me labeled.
So merely labeled. So one is things exist in dependence upon causes, things exist in dependence upon the parts, and finally they exist in dependence upon the name, the label. That's it, the three levels. And the third one is the conclusion you come to when you've understood the other two. They say you realize merely labeled after you've realized emptiness. That's what they say. So that'll do. I didn't mean to talk so long. I'm so sorry. No questions online. I can't believe there's not one single question. Come on. There has to be something. Not one single question. Nothing. Okay. So we did a tiny bit of merit by doing 3 minutes Heart Sutra. We didn't do chanting the names, but never mind. We talked.
One more question.
What, sweetheart?
I have,
One more question.
Good. Come on, talk to me.
I'll try to get this right.
Good,
So,
sure. No worries.
Great struggle I've had with trying to see if I'm progressing.
Yes.
And you alluded to the answer to my question, which was when Lama Zopa had no fear.
Yes.
Good gauge.
Yes.
It sounds like,
Yes.
right? Where I struggle, if everything's interdependent,
Yes.
you're interdependent,
Yeah.
you are
Yeah.
interdependent, I am interdependent.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
How do I know if I'm doing it right, if there's no measure or gauge that I can reflect back?
But there is a measure. This is the point. If we add a bit more to that, the first stages of practice are at least control your body and speech and not going around jumping on every boy or girl and killing and stealing and lying. So you're harnessing your crazy energy, which means you're practicing ethics. Then you start to really look into your mind and you begin to distinguish between the neuroses, the voices of ego, the attachment and anger and jealousy, and the between those and the goodness within us. That's the key job in daily practice. And so then as you progress, first controlling the body and speech, then you begin to control the mind. And then literally the sign of success is to become less up and down, less neurotic, less panic stricken. Oh my God, from pillar to post between I'm going to kill myself and everything's perfect, which are the emotional kind of consequences of having attachment and aversion and depression and the dramas. So they're the voices of ego grasping. So in those stages of practice, we're not thinking about there's no I, that's more subtle, but you're calming the voices of ego grasping down, the attachment and aversion and jealousy and depression. And the sign of success is you become more stable, more fulfilled, less neurotic. That's the sign. So you can tell that you are progressing. Delight, you are progressing. If you've been practicing all these years, honey child, you are progressing. Do you not agree? You look
Yes.
doubtful.
Yeah, no, I do. I guess where I fall short, where I run into problems is,
You fall short where, sorry?
well, I think where I run into problems is then the gauge then is me. Then I'm using the gauge of myself and my condition.
But it's dependent arising you. It's okay. You don't, emptiness of you. What's your name?
Dave.
Dave. This is not saying there's no Dave. There's a dependent arising Dave. So thinking that way, oh, there's a depend. So the sign of success of dependent arising Dave is Dave's lessening the voices of ego, of grasping at the intrinsic Dave, which is giving up attachment and all those. They're the signs of success. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's a dependent arising Dave. There's not an intrinsic independent Dave. That's the way to put it. Are you with me?
Yeah.
But you're not using me as the basis. No, you're
Right.
not. You're looking at the individual, the bits and pieces. You're looking at the attachment. You're looking at the anger, like Lama Zopa said, the head, the person known as Dave. Relax. Don't look for Dave. You're not looking for Dave. You're looking at the parts of Dave: anger, jealousy, depression, anxiety, love, patience, kindness. They're the pieces to look at. You get my point?
Yes,
Good.
thank you.
Good. So be delight that you're making progress, because we often think we're not. That's our worst crime against ourselves. Okay, Dave.
Thank you.
What else, people? That's all. Will that do? Yes. Will that do? Yes. 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 All right. Okay, so we finished. Just do dedications, and we just like that we've all met together and did a few things. Sunny, come on, take your computer back down and show us the dedication, please, sweetheart. Huh? Okay. So people on Zoom, thank you so much for coming, and everybody else in the room here. Very nice, all of us. We shared this time together and created lots of virtuous karmic seeds in our mind. Be so happy. We're a work in progress, never forget. Can you squeeze up? Can you do your magic over here, darling? Squeeze up there, squeeze down the people and squeeze up the dog. Oh, okay, very good. Simple enough. Thank you so much, sweetheart. Well done, exactly. Okay, people, we're ready. Say our good prayers. So we say them in, we'll just say the words. And so look, the words have meaning. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, what that means, I have to say it. What that means is merit is just the word used to refer to positive actions and thoughts that we have done that drop little seeds into our mind, doesn't go astray. So due to these virtuous actions that we've done, by listening to these teachings, may we quickly attain the state of a Buddha, Guru Buddha, and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. And so this marvelous aspiration, may the supreme jewel bodhicitta, this amazing shift in the mind where we only want to benefit others, that has not arisen in the minds of beings, may it arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. So why don't we just say the long life? We'll do this one, the Tongsi Dalai Lama, and then we'll do the little long life prayer of Lama Zopa as well. But, I mean, the coming back soon prayer of Lama Zopa. So His Holiness, the wish granting, wish fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in the world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And this prayer that His Holiness wrote for us to recite, those who are students, for Lama Zopa to come back quickly, please. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Lozang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you are the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. With striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from mother living beings you suddenly departed to peace. Such a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Okay, darling people, I'm sorry I didn't do the other prayer. And I talked a bit long, but it went so quickly I couldn't believe it. So I said those words, and they were very helpful to me, because every time I say those words, it helps me. So thank you for the opportunity to say them. And if there's any benefit at all, then we all delight and we try to practice, okay? And as Dave points out, rejoice in our marvelous potential. Rejoice in our progress. We must do that. So just hearing about emptiness puts like atomic bombs under ego grasping. So be so happy we've had this discussion, you know. Thank you, Jonathan. So cool. Thank you. Thank you, dear Zoomers. Goodbye. See you next time.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you, Sunny.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.